It was raining sideways in the city that never sleeps, but the only thing bleeding out faster than the neon lights was the retail crypto market. I poured myself 2 fingers of cheap bourbon, kicked my feet up on the mahogany desk, and stared at the terminal screen. The title on the case file read, "Ripple just made a move that could change XRP overnight." But the poor saps on the street were too busy crying over the blood in the gutters to notice the real heist. The spot price was hovering around a pathetic $1.35. The morning papers were screaming about macroeconomic terror, Middle Eastern conflicts, and negative funding rates on the perpetual futures markets. They want you to believe the sky is falling. But in my line of work, you learn pretty quick that when the street is panicking, the mob bosses are usually the ones quietly pulling the fire alarm. I took a drag from my cigarette and dug into the raw ledger data. That is when I found the smoking gun. Ripple did not just make a minor business update, they just hardwired themselves directly into the central nervous system of Wall Street. The Depository Trust and Clearing Corporation, the absolute beating heart of the United States traditional financial system, just added Ripple's prime brokerage arm to their National Securities Clearing Corporation directory. They are operating under the executing broker code HRFI for over-the-counter products. Do you understand what that means, kid? The very same company that the feds tried to bury, alive a few years ago, just secured a permanent gateway into the trillion-dollar infrastructure that settles and clears trades for the biggest financial institutions on the planet. This is not a drill, it is a complete structural takeover. But the market makers do not want you holding your bags when the vault finally opens. They are engineering this brutal price suppression to shake down the tourists. They are pushing the open interest weighted funding rates into the negative to manufacture a terrifying illusion of a bear market. If you fold your hand and sell your assets at $1.35, you are just another chalk outline on the sidewalk. You have to look past the rain and the sirens. The foundation is officially poured, and the legacy clearinghouses are plugging directly into the ledger. The real move is hidden entirely in plain sight. Do not let them hustle you. You need to wake up and smell the corruption. The whales are relying entirely on your impatience to fund their massive retirement accounts. This is a game of sheer psychological endurance, and the weak hands are being systematically eradicated from the board right now. I slammed the case file shut and started following the money trail, because the money trail never lies. If you want to crack a case this big, you have to completely ignore the distracting noise of the daily charts and track the heavy footprints of the institutional syndicates. While the retail traders are throwing themselves off the bridge because of a temporary dip, my contacts in the underground data broker networks handed me a piece of intelligence that changes everything. Over the past few weeks, deep-pocketed whales have aggressively accumulated over 1.3 billion physical XRP tokens. Let that sink into your skull for a minute. While the public is paralyzed by the fear of negative news cycles and escalating global conflicts, the smartest and most ruthless financial operators on the planet are quietly backing up armored trucks to the loading dock. They are not buying this massive supply on the open exchanges because dropping $1 billion market order would instantly vaporize their profit margins and send the spot price screaming into the stratosphere. Instead, they are operating entirely within the shadows of over-the-counter dark pools. These are the hidden, unregulated back alleys of the financial system where the United States spot exchange traded funds, managed by titans like Bitwise and Franklin Templeton, can source their liquidity without tripping the public alarms. They use private liquidity providers who absorb the capitulation of panicked retail investors at a steep discount. To perfectly camouflage this massive operation, these same liquidity entities aggressively short the public perpetual futures markets, fabricating a dense, impenetrable ceiling on the retail price. It is the perfect crime. They manufacture the exact conditions that cause you to sell, and then they scoop up your discarded digital assets for pennies on the dollar. But the supply is mathematically finite, and the dark pool reserves are rapidly drying up. Our forensic scanners confirm that hundreds of millions of tokens are currently bleeding out of centralized exchange hot wallets and disappearing permanently into heavily encrypted institutional cold storage vaults. They are intentionally locking up the floating supply. When the physical inventory finally runs out, those massive institutional orders will be forcibly routed through the public lit markets. When that happens, the algorithmic suppression will violently shatter, and the subsequent price shock will leave the retail sellers completely stranded. You are being robbed blind in broad daylight. Stop trusting the flashing red numbers on your mobile app and start trusting the cold, hard logic of the blockchain. The greatest wealth transfer in modern history is happening right under your nose. The only way to survive the hustle is to refuse to sell your property. I poured another glass and shifted my gaze across the Pacific because the conspiracy stretches far beyond the corrupted borders of Wall Street. A wise detective knows that a global syndicate always hedges its bets internationally. Just days ago, Ripple's strategic partner in Japan, the legendary SBI Holdings, quietly dropped a $64 million bombshell on the market. They launched their first series of fully compliant on-chain corporate bonds specifically designed to reward retail investors with physical XRP. This is not some cheap promotional gimmick. This is a massive Japanese banking conglomerate intentionally embedding the native token directly into the architecture of a regulated, traditional fixed-income product. If you cannot see how a sovereign institution utilizing the ledger to settle multi-million-dollar bond distributions completely changes the fundamental demand mechanics overnight, then you have absolutely no business investigating this sector. But the plot thickens even further. Ripple just pulled the trigger on a massive, sweeping upgrade to their global Ripple payments platform. They are no longer just a specialized tool for cross-border remittances. Through strategic corporate acquisitions, they have introduced unified collections, advanced automated liquidity, and fully managed enterprise custody. They are transforming into an omni-channel banking behemoth capable of holding, exchanging, and paying out in both traditional fiat and their newly minted RLUSD stablecoin. And what sits at the absolute center of this upgraded financial web? XRP. It acts as the mandatory high-speed universal bridge currency required to seamlessly connect these massive institutional liquidity pools. Every single enterprise transaction will quietly burn a fraction of the network fuel. Meanwhile, back here in the States, the political fix is already in. The highly anticipated Digital Asset Market Clarity Act just blew right past its March 1st White House drafting deadline. The retail crowd saw that missed deadline and immediately started panic selling, assuming the legislation was dead in the water. That is exactly the reaction the lobbyists paid for. Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse is still projecting an 80% probability that the legislation passes by April, permanently classifying the asset as a digital commodity. The political smokescreens are being deployed to keep you completely distracted, while the final legislative signatures are drafted in the back rooms. The entire global infrastructure is actively locking into place. If you fall for the mainstream media narratives and abandon your position just because of a delayed bureaucratic deadline, you are playing right into the hands of the legacy cartels. They want you completely demoralized so they can monopolize the ultimate global settlement layer before the legislation passes. I snuffed out the cigarette and filed the dossier away in the steel cabinet. The evidence is overwhelming, and any detective worth his badge can see exactly where this case is heading. We have empirically proven the massive DTCC institutional integration, the billion-dollar whale accumulation hiding within the dark pools, the Japanese corporate bond utility, and the inevitable political breakthrough of the Clarity Act. So, how does a smart operator survive the shootout and walk away with the prize when the smoke finally clears? The heavy hitters in the financial forecasting divisions, including the sharp suits over at Standard Chartered Bank, have thoroughly calculated the trajectory and established a rock-solid, macro-adjusted baseline target of $8 per token for the end of the 2026 fiscal cycle. When you are currently sitting in the $1.35 trench, an $8 payday sounds like a pipe dream peddled by street hustlers. But when you factor in the mathematical certainty of a violently constricting supply curve colliding head-on with exponential institutional utility, that $8 target becomes a highly conservative stepping stone. However, you cannot navigate this gritty, unforgiving underworld without a cold, calculated exit strategy. Emotion will get you killed in this market. I strictly operate utilizing a completely automated survival tactic known as the Thirds Protocol. When the network price violently breaks through the historical all-time high boundary of $3.84, you must algorithmically pull the trigger and liquidate exactly 33% of your stash. This single emotionless maneuver secures the complete recovery of your initial bankroll, instantly transforming the remainder of your digital portfolio into pure, stress-free profit. The secondary operational tranche is designated to ride the volatility all the way toward the $8 institutional target zone, serving as your primary mechanism for total financial liberation. The final tertiary portion must be securely locked away in a deep cold storage vault for the ultimate long-term macroeconomic play, anticipating the network's final evolution into the absolute core of the tokenized global economy. Finally, you must immediately upgrade your cryptographic security infrastructure. The streets are swarming with sophisticated cyber thieves and malicious phishing operations explicitly designed to pick your pockets right before the biggest payday in history. Trust no one, verify the data on the ledger, and execute your strategy with absolute, ruthless precision. The greatest heist of the century is almost complete. make sure you are the one walking away with the bag. The legacy bankers are desperately trying to rewrite the rules of the game to ensure you lose, but the immutable laws of mathematics and cryptography are entirely on your side. Step out of the rain, fortify your position, and stay incredibly vigilant. This case is officially closed.